Bible in a Year Live, Chronological Project, Week 39, Day 2, God's Word Translation. But before we begin, we gather every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Daylight Saving Time on Zoom to read through the Bible live together. You can find the Zoom details in the description. Also, join me today in wishing the founder of Bible in a Year Live podcast, Shane Dennis, a happy birthday. Let's dig in. Rumors about Jesus. Herod the ruler heard about everything that was happening. He didn't know what to make of it. Some people were saying that John had come back to life. Others said that Elijah had appeared, and still others said that one of the prophets from long ago had come back to life. Herod said, "I had John's head cut off. Who is this person I'm hearing so much about?" So Herod wanted to see Jesus. Recalling John's death. King Herod heard about Jesus because Jesus' name had become well known. Some people were saying, John the Baptizer has come back to life. That's why he has the power to perform these miracles. Others said, he's Elijah. Still others said, he's a prophet like one of the other prophets. But when Herod heard about it, he said, I had John's head cut off, and he has come back to life? Herod had sent men who had arrested John, tied him up, and put him in prison. Herod did that for Herodias, whom he had married. She used to be his brother Philip's wife. John had been telling Herod, it's not right for you to be married to your brother's wife. So Herodias held a grudge against John and wanted to kill him, but she wasn't allowed to do it because Herod was afraid of John. Herod knew that John was a fair and holy man, so he protected him. When he listened to John, he would become very disturbed, and yet he liked to listen to him. An opportunity finally came on Herod's birthday. Herod gave a dinner for his top officials, army officers, and the most important people in Galilee. His daughter, that is, Herodias' daughter, came in and danced. Herod and his guests were delighted with her. The king told the girl, "Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you." He swore an oath to her. "I'll give you anything you ask for, up to half of my kingdom." So she went out and asked her mother, "What should I ask for?" Her mother said, "Ask for the head of John the Baptizer." So the girl hurried back to the king with her request. She said, "I want you to give me the head of John the Baptizer on a platter at once." The king deeply regretted his promise, but because of his oath and his guests, he didn't want to refuse her. Immediately, the king sent a guard and ordered him to bring John's head. The guard cut off John's head in prison. Then he brought the head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. When John's disciples heard about this, they came for his body and laid it in a tomb. Recalling John's death. At that time, Herod, ruler of Galilee, heard the news about Jesus. He said to his officials, "This is John the Baptizer. He has come back to life. That's why he has the power to perform these miracles." Herod had arrested John, tied him up, and put him in prison. Herod did this for Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip. John had been telling Herod, "It's not right for you to be married to her." So Herod wanted to kill John. However, he was afraid of the people because they thought John was a prophet. When Herod celebrated his birthday, Herodias' daughter danced for his guests. Herod was so delighted with her that he swore he would give her anything she wanted. Urged by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptizer on a platter." The king regretted his promise, but because of his oath and his guests, he ordered that her wish be granted. He had John's head cut off in prison, so the head was brought on a platter given to the girl, who took it to her mother. John's disciples came for the body and buried it. Then they went to tell Jesus. Jesus feeds more than 5,000. When Jesus heard about John, he left in a boat and went to a place where he could be alone. The crowds heard about this and followed him on foot from the cities. When Jesus got out of the boat, he saw a large crowd. He felt sorry for them and cured their sick people. In the evening, the disciples came to him. They said, "No one lives around here, and it's already late. Send the crowds to the villages to buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." They told him, "All we have here are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Jesus said, "Bring them to me." Then he ordered the people to sit down on the grass. After he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed the food, broke the loaves apart, gave them to the disciples, and they gave them to the people. All of them ate as much as they wanted. When they picked up the leftover pieces, they filled 12 baskets. About 5,000 men had eaten. This number does not include the women and children who had eaten. Jesus feeds 5,000. The apostles gathered around Jesus. They reported to him everything they had done and taught. So he said to them, "Let's go to a place where we can be alone to rest for a while." Many people were coming and going, and Jesus and the apostles didn't even have a chance to eat. So they went away in a boat to a place where they could be alone. But many people saw them leave and recognized them. The people ran from all the cities and arrived ahead of them. When Jesus got out of the boat, he saw a large crowd and felt sorry for them. They were like sheep without a shepherd, so he spent a lot of time teaching them. When it was late, his disciples came to him. They said, "No one lives around here, and it's already late. Send the people to the closest farms and villages to buy themselves something to eat." Jesus replied, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Should we go and spend about a year's wages on bread to feed them?" He said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." When they found out, they told him, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Then he ordered all of them to sit down in groups on the green grass. They sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. After he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed the food. He broke the loaves apart and kept giving them to the disciples to give to the people. He also gave pieces of the 2 fish to everyone. All of them ate as much as they wanted. When they picked up the leftover pieces, they filled 12 baskets with bread and fish. There were 5,000 men who had eaten the bread. Jesus feeds 5,000. The apostles came back and told Jesus everything they had done. He took them with him to a city called Bethsaida so that they could be alone. But the crowds found out about this and followed him. He welcomed them, talked to them about God's kingdom, and cured those who were sick. Toward the end of the day, the 12 apostles came to him. They said to him, "Send the crowd to the closest villages and farms so that they can get some food and a place to stay. No one lives around here." Jesus replied, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Unless we go to buy food for all these people, that's all we have." There were about 5,000 men. Then he told his disciples, "Have them sit in groups of about 50. So they did this. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven, and blessed the food. He broke the loaves apart and kept giving them to the disciples to give to the crowd. All of them ate as much as they wanted. When they picked up the leftover pieces, they filled 12 baskets. Jesus feeds more than 5,000. Jesus later crossed to another side of the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd followed him because they saw the miracles that he performed for the sick. Jesus went up a mountain and sat with his disciples. The time for the Jewish Passover festival was near. As Jesus saw a large crowd coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy bread for these people to eat?" Jesus asked this question to test him. He already knew what he was going to do. Philip answered, "We would need about a year's wages to buy enough bread for each of them to have a piece." One of Jesus' disciples, Andrew, who was Simon Peter's brother, told him, "A boy who has 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 small fish is here, but they won't go very far for so many people." And Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." The people had plenty of grass to sit on. There were about 5,000 men in the crowd. Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to the people who were sitting there. He did the same thing with the fish. All the people ate as much as they wanted. When the people were full, Jesus told his disciples, "Gather the leftover pieces so that nothing would be wasted." The disciples gathered the leftover pieces of bread and filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the miracle Jesus performed, they said, "This man is certainly the prophet who is come into the world." Jesus realized that the people intended to take him by force and make him king, so he returned to the mountain by himself. Jesus walks on the sea. Jesus quickly made his disciples get into a boat and crossed to Bethsaida ahead of him while he sent the people away. After saying goodbye to them, he went up a mountain to pray. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Jesus saw that they were in a lot of trouble as they rowed, because they were going against the wind. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, he came to them. He was walking on the sea. He wanted to pass by them. When they saw him walking on the sea, they thought, "It's a ghost," and they began to scream. All of them saw him and were terrified. Immediately he said, "Calm down, it's me. Don't be afraid." He got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped blowing. The disciples were astounded. They didn't understand what had happened with the loaves of bread. Instead, their minds were closed. Jesus walks on the sea. Jesus quickly made his disciples get into a boat and cross to the other side ahead of him, while he sent the people away. After sending the people away, he went up a mountain to pray by himself. When evening came, he was there alone. The boat, now hundreds of yards from shore, was being thrown around by the waves because it was going against the wind. Between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, he came to them. He was walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. They said, "It's a ghost," and began to scream because they were afraid. Immediately Jesus said, "Calm down, it's me. Don't be afraid." Peter answered, "Lord, if it is you, order me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he noticed how strong the wind was, he became afraid and started to sink. He shouted, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out, caught hold of him, and said, "You have so little faith. Why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped blowing. The men in the boat bowed down in front of Jesus and said, "You are truly the Son of God." Jesus walks on the sea. When evening came, his disciples went to the sea. They got into a boat and started to cross the sea to the city of Capernaum. By this time it was dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. A strong wind started to blow and stir up the sea. After they had rowed 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea. He was coming near the boat, and they became terrified. Jesus told them, "It's me. Don't be afraid." So they were willing to help Jesus into the boat. Immediately, the boat reached the shore where they were going. They crossed the sea, came to the shore at Gennesaret, and anchored there. As soon as they stepped off the boat, the people recognized Jesus. They ran all over the countryside and began to carry the sick on cots to any place where they heard he was. Whenever he would go into villages, cities, or farms, people would put their sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch the edge of his clothes. Everyone who touched his clothes was made well. They crossed the sea and landed at Gennesaret. The men there recognized Jesus and sent messengers all around the countryside. The people brought him everyone who was sick. They begged him to let them touch just the edge of his clothes. Everyone who touched his clothes was made well.